this week, the county released the anticipated reports on the sexual harassment and the information leaking. Ron, let's start with the harassment findings report. What were your findings? What were your thoughts from that?
Reading the report pretty much in detail, and they went through it point by point. And from what I read and what was reported from the legal team that looked at the whole thing, there wasn't merit over and above what we already knew.
Well,
there wasn't.
You said merit, but I mean there was.
Well, maybe
substance.
I'll take the word merit. There wasn't anything over and
That
above
we didn't
what
already
we
know.
already knew.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll rephrase it. So we've been talking about the same thing over and over and over, and the report didn't add anything to it. Now there's a legal challenge. There's a challenge in court. Will there be something new that
You
comes
mean the
out of
civil
that legal?
case?
Yeah, the civil case. Will
Right.
there be? Will that civil case bring out things new? So it's going to be interesting. It's also interesting of the dynamics that somebody else is involved in this whole thing. And I think that adds merit to the case. There's other folks that were romantically inclined, allegedly, by the report and by others that I'm sure will come to a head at some point in the near future.
Yeah, surprisingly, and I saw that too, Ron, and obviously they redacted all of the names.
But there was only so many people over there.
There were only so many people over there, and frankly, you didn't have to, at least in my mind,
Right.
you didn't have to stretch very far to figure out whose name was supposed to be where in that particular report.
Well, you know, like Ron said, you know, essentially this report substantiated what we have read in the newspaper or heard on local television. It validated what we have heard and what the coverage was. There was no new revelations. I mean, reading through it, okay, yes, they went through very aggressively with a black pen and struck out names, but the story was already written, and we could just put the names in of the individuals who are in he or she in the context of the story. So I mean, it was no surprise. You know, the one that you mentioned about well, there's additional parties that may have had a tryst, that was interesting, but.
And I'm just wondering at what point do they really go into discussing the names of the people in public? Both were there on taxpayers' money. Both had an obligation to represent Washington County well. And having been a county commissioner for 20 years and kind of a senior person in the elected position in the county, those kinds of things should not be tolerated.
Do you think
from
because some of the parties that are no longer involved in county government that we're just going to sort of try to move forward from that point, or you think people are going to keep churning the compost pile?
As long as that individual keeps stirring the pot, then he's fair game on what's talked about. So that's how I see it.
So I'm gonna jump in and say that the view's pretty good from the cheap seats. These are allegations,
Right.
and there is no finding of fact. I mean, in my mind, the report is what it is, and you draw from that what you can. And I'm sure that two people can read that report and draw two significantly different positions from it.
If you know the report, you study both reports and go over the names and fill in the names for the people that attended, things come together.
But
I
if
understand.
you
But
surmise
I think-
what's going on and you don't know, it makes a difference. I would agree.
I think we can all agree that it's a shame that our county wound up getting a black eye over these individuals.
Yeah, my point is twofold in this. Number one, there are many things that we need to spend money on in our county. It to me is a shame that we ended up, and I don't know what the cost of these reports were, but I'm sure it's not
$90,000.
cheap, $90,000. It's a shame to me that we ended up having to do this.
But why not use the whole report? There's a whole bunch of other stuff in the report to talk about that they haven't talked about. I mean, we're still honed in on two people and letting everything else go. And that report is expansive and it's detailed.
But you also said, I think both of you said, that there was nothing new.
No, there was nothing new on the two individuals on the
Okay.
sexual harassment.
You think there's things that are new otherwise?
Oh my gracious, yes.
Okay. The report, by the way, in its entirety isn't available as a link from the Herald Mail website. So if you're interested in seeing that, we would recommend you could do that. Let's talk about the leaking report, though, the information leaking with Commissioner Klein and that investigation. Henry, any new stuff there?
You know, as I'm reading through and, you know, read also in Herald Mail, you know, that sort of collaborate saying, oh, well, it was kind of fished to certain individuals who were friendly to a certain individual, that they thought they could get more mileage of it if they released the information. So I thought that was a little bit interesting how it sort of worked its way around to actually get the leak into someone's hands that could be reported.
In your view, Henry, and there is a segment of the population that calls this a leak. There's a segment of the population that calls this a whistleblower. There's a segment of the population, which may be the largest, that say, I really don't care. Where are you on that continuum?
I think this is a leak. And the reason why I say I think it's
And by leak, are you saying inappropriately leaked?
I think it was a leak done for a political gain. And that may sound harsh, but I think it was to sort of prop up the county commissioners need to function as a team. And regardless of what their political affiliations are, they need to function as a team. This all of a sudden was used to undermine one county commissioner while the other one was kind of lifted up with bravado. So I think it was done for political gain. And did it harness that? I'm not saying yes or no. We'll let the voters decide. But I think there was a lot of harm that was done through this leak that should have been kept behind closed doors.
Ron?
Multitude of leaks. It wasn't just one leak.
But leak versus whistleblower, where are you on that?
A whistleblower to me is an employee that knows something that's going to tell about it. This was an elected official that took information that they had, added to that information, and put it out and added to it to employees. I talk to employees all the time. I've talked to people over to Williamsport Legion out to dinner. I've heard some of the comments that came back. They actually wanted Greg Murray fired before he came back from South Korea. Okay, when he came back, that was talked about. And one of the people that's doing the leaking and putting that information out was heading that type of thing up. That's borne out in the report. So when you hear these types of things, it's still not getting down to the point. The news coverage will get better, and they will uncover it. And if they don't, the political candidates will.
How do you argue on one side that government should be totally transparent? And I've heard from both of you, including myself, that thought process, and then at the same time call this inappropriate. I mean, was there confidential information that was leaked here? I didn't see that.
I don't think it's. I think there are certain benefits of, and you know, this goes to what I said earlier about teamwork. Okay, you have to be able to work. Now, the three of us, while we can have vastly disagreeing viewpoints, we managed to work together and put together a show. This was done outside of that team effort. And you know, by one, and then others followed suit. I mean, there's others, and not just one individual that did this, but that started to undermine, and then that caused distrust among the rest of the team members. And you could see and read that as you see votes going on within the county commissioner board, and you see other actions. And you know, this kind of stems to the thing we talked several years ago, well, about a year ago on the show about the Lanco-Pinland money, and where someone got upset over things. So you know, there's a lot of things that play in. I just think that there's a bond of trust that, you know, Ron, you probably had that when you served as county commissioner. You had a bond of trust with your fellow commissioners that
all five.
If you had an issue that you were concerned with on them, that you would approach them directly and not necessarily use the press as a surrogate for you.
Okay, fair point. One last question on this. As we look at the policies and procedures that the county has put in place to deal with this, does anyone feel like that the leak and the sexual harassment thing was indicative of some less than adequate or non-existent policies on the county's end, or policies that were not expansive enough to cover the elected officials?
Why don't you take that?
Going back a decade, the county administrator was in place for about a decade. They had the chance to put all those policies into place. The policies weren't into place. Why weren't they into place? Don't come back now, which they are doing, and blaming the current county administrator and the current board for not having the policies in place. When you're there for a decade and you don't have it done, there's an issue. Should there have been a policy in place? I think there was. Was it violated?
But, you know, our county government was reactive to the situation. It's hard to, this is something completely unanticipated that took place. Or we hope it was unanticipated that took place.
You know what?
But, it's hard to be proactive because in this society, things are ever evolving today.
They are, and they're evolving quickly.
And they're evolving quicker than we can actually codify a policy.
And I get the Monday morning quarterback thing, but I will tell you, I was in banking 15 years ago, and I remember the last year I was in banking having to attend at least 3 sexual harassment trainings, having for the entire organization, because they had the foresight to realize that this was an issue.
Who's they? Who made sure that it got done?
The HR staff.
Oh, the HR staff. So
Does
you
the county
say
have an HR staff?
Yes, they do have. Should they have done it? Should the county attorneys have done it? Should the county
In my
administrator
opinion,
have done it?
absolutely they should have.
So how many
I don't
people
say-
were negligent on this whole issue?
Well,
I don't think it falls on the shoulder of any one individual.
What
but-
should?
But I really don't think it, because I think they were not proactive in dealing with the situation.
And that's a
It should have
problem.
been dealt with 10 years ago, as you
that's
said.
a problem.
Okay?
And I don't say this again, and yes, this is a problem, and it's great to, it's easy to, the view's good from the cheap seats. It's easy to point out the problem, and I know we've got a great credit rating, and there are many, many things. We all live here because we love this community. So I'm not suggesting that I don't. But in my mind, these policy issues are big.
Well, just because you're a brilliant person doesn't say you exercise good judgment.
And with that, we will move on. Coming up next, Fast Five. Stay tuned.